I never expected that a simple tutoring job would lead me into a world I wasn't prepared for. At 22, I thought I had already experienced enough to understand where desire begins and responsibility ends. But that was before I met the Coles, before I stepped into a house full of polished floors, closed doors, and silent longing that it was late afternoon when I arrived at their home for the first time. The sky was soft with fading light, and a quiet breeze skimmed through tall hedges lining the driveway. Everything about the property suggested a family that valued order and presentation. I straightened my shirt, hoping I wouldn't look too out of place. The door opened before I could knock twice. Liam Cole, my new student, stood there with a wary expression. He was 18, lean, with dark hair that fell slightly into his eyes as if he wanted to hide behind it. He gave me a nod, more polite than friendly, and stepped aside to let me in. "Sorry about the mess," he said, though the entrance looked spotless. "No worries," I answered, offering a small smile. "We'll just focus on your literature essays today." He nodded again and led me toward the dining room table set up with books and loose worksheets. I noticed how he avoided eye contact, as if conversation was an exhausting chore. His voice was soft, nearly swallowed by the spacious room that we began working on a passage from Shakespeare. Liam understood the words but not the emotions behind them. He hesitated every time I asked what a character might be feeling. It dawned on me that he wasn't struggling with comprehension, he was struggling to express himself. I admired his effort, though his frustration simmered beneath the surface. About 20 minutes into the lesson, I sensed movement behind us. The shift in air felt immediate and commanding. When I turned, I saw him, Adrian Cole. That he looked far younger than what I had imagined when Liam's mother hired me over the phone. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a crisp white shirt with sleeves casually rolled up. His presence was magnetic, the kind that filled a room without trying. The chiseled symmetry of his features was softened by a gentle weariness around his eyes, blue eyes that studied me with quiet curiosity. "You must be Evan," he said, voice smooth and confident. "Yes. Nice to meet you, Mr. Cole." "Adrian," he corrected, offering a handshake. His palm was warm, grip strong. "Thanks for helping Liam. We want him to feel more prepared this year." Liam stiffened slightly, pretending to focus on his notebook. I wondered what kind of relationship existed between them. The distance was invisible but heavy. Adrian stayed longer than necessary, leaning against the counter as if fascinated by our tutoring. Every time my eyes flicked upward, he was already looking at me. There was a pull in his gaze, not aggressive, but undeniably attentive. I tried to maintain professionalism, though awareness prickled across my skin. After a few minutes, he left the room with a reassuring pat to his son's shoulder. Liam didn't react, except for a brief tightening of his jaw. When Adrian's steps faded, the house returned to its quiet stillness. That we continued working, but the atmosphere had shifted. My mind wandered despite my efforts. Something about Adrian lingered, like a melody I'd heard once but couldn't fully remember. By the end of the session, Liam seemed slightly more comfortable with me, though still cautious. I gathered my notes as he packed his books, moving with hurried motions as if eager to escape the room. "I'll see you next week?" I asked gently. He nodded. "Yeah, thanks." I followed him back to the entryway. Before he could open the door, Adrian appeared once more. This time he carried 2 cups of coffee, steam rising into the air with a comforting scent of caramel. "For the road," he said, handing one to me. "I hope you didn't find the first day too dull." "Not at all," I replied. "Liam's bright. Just needs a bit of confidence." Adrian's lips lifted into a slow, approving smile. "Good. I knew hiring you was the right choice." His words landed with unexpected weight. The compliment felt intimate, though it shouldn't have. His eyes held mine a moment longer, long enough for my pulse to react before he looked away. He walked me outside, the evening air cool against my face. When he closed the door behind us, his tone lowered slightly. "Meant only for me." "I appreciate what you're doing," he murmured. "I'll make sure you're taken care of." The subtle implication curled heat into my stomach. I forced myself to breathe steadily, to remain anchored. "Thank you," I managed. As I stepped off the porch, something brushed against my arm, his fingertips, deliberate and fleeting. It lasted less than a second, but it sparked like lightning beneath my skin. I kept walking, pretending the touch didn't consume my thoughts. But when I reached the street corner, my phone buzzed. A new message, from Adrian: "Come again tomorrow, if you can." I stared at the screen, heart pounding with a dangerous thrill that I should say no, but even then, I already knew I wouldn't. I told myself that returning the next day was simply professional responsibility. Tutors don't cancel because their heartbeat quickens around a student's father. Yet, as I walked up the familiar path to the Cole residence, I couldn't ignore the anticipation curling through my chest. The house seemed quieter than before, as if it waited with me. Liam greeted me with a subdued nod. His eyes were shadowed with something unreadable, exhaustion or suspicion, I wasn't sure. We sat up in the same place, sunlight pooling across textbooks like a spotlight on our silence. Today, he struggled more than usual. Words tangled on his tongue. His attention drifted. Every few minutes, he stared toward the hallway, expecting someone. That someone arrived. Adrian stepped in holding 2 glasses of iced tea, casual but too perfectly timed. His shirt today was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves again rolled. I told myself the detail didn't matter, but I noticed anyway. Hope you don't mind something a little colder, he said, handing me a drink. His gaze lingered long enough for heat to rise up my neck. Liam's expression tightened. Dad, we're studying. Adrian chuckled. Of course you are. His attention returned to me. Don't let him overwork you. He left, but not without that lingering glance over his shoulder. Liam followed it with narrowed eyes, then closed his book abruptly. You don't have to stay long today, he muttered. We'll take it slow, I replied gently. But I felt the gulf widening between us. He wasn't angry at me specifically, just afraid of being forgotten. The session ended early. As Liam retreated upstairs, I gathered my things. Before I could leave, Adrian appeared again, almost as if he had been waiting. You have a minute, he asked. That I should have said no. Instead, I nodded. He led me into a room I hadn't seen before, a home office bathed in warm lamplight. Books filled the walls, awards polished to a shine, and family photos presented a curated history. In one frame, Adrian smiled with his arm around a woman, obviously his wife. Despite his charm, reality was displayed right there behind glass. I didn't get a chance to talk to you yesterday, Adrian said, closing the door behind him. How long have you been tutoring? 2 years, I answered, suddenly aware of how small the space felt. It helps with school. You're studying literature. Education. I want to teach. He smiled, the kind of smile that made you feel chosen. You already have the presence for it. I laughed nervously. Presence. Confidence. Warmth. His eyes softened. Liam needs someone like you. The compliment shouldn't have thrilled me this much. But his voice carried a sincerity that disarmed me. His proximity did the rest. That he walked closer, fingertips brushing the spine of a book before trailing down onto the desk between us. The air thickened around his movements, and I searched for something meaningful to say, anything to break the silence before it became something else. Your wife, we're separated, he interrupted, a hint of pain flaring behind his calm expression. Trying to hold a life together that already cracked apart, it's exhausting. His confession slipped into the space like a secret craving light. I'm sorry, I said, but the sympathy in my voice betrayed curiosity too. That he stepped nearer, close enough that I could smell cedar and citrus in his cologne. Close enough that every rational thought in my mind started to dissolve. Evan, he murmured, my name sounding warmer than I'd ever heard it. You make this house feel less lonely. My breath caught. My pulse hammered. The boundary between right and wrong blurred beneath his gaze. I shouldn't, I whispered. Adrian's hand reached up, tracing a feather-light line along my jaw. Tell me to stop, he said. His tone was gentle, but his eyes were blazing with want that I couldn't speak. My silence became permission. He leaned in, slow enough for me to pull away, but I didn't. Our lips met, soft, searching, electric. A kiss that awakened every nerve in my body and silenced every warning. The door creaked. We startled apart just as Liam froze in the doorway. His eyes darted between us, betrayal dawning like a storm rolling in. Dad? His voice was sharp, disbelief cracking through it. Adrian straightened instantly, clearing his throat. Liam, we were just. Liam didn't wait for an explanation. He turned and bolted up the stairs, footsteps pounding like accusations against the walls. My chest tightened with dread. The room felt colder. Adrian exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. He's been through a lot, he muttered. This isn't how I wanted him to find out. The world can disappoint him. I swallowed hard. My guilt tasted bitter. I should go, I said. Adrian caught my wrist gently, not forceful, but pleading. Don't pull away from me now. You feel this too. I didn't trust my voice, so I didn't answer. I slipped free from his hold, grabbed my bag, and rushed toward the door. As I stepped outside, the evening air slapped my flushed skin. I paused only once, to look back. Adrian stood at the entrance, watching me, desire and regret warring in his eyes. I kept walking, but his voice, his confession, echoed through my mind. You make this house feel less lonely. The morning after blurred into ordinary motions, yet nothing felt ordinary to Ethan. He moved through the cabin with deliberate calm, helping Ryan clear dishes, laughing at stories that rolled too easily from his friend's tongue. But beneath every word, beneath every breath, a secret pulsed between him and Mark, silent and undeniable. Mark behaved as though nothing had happened. His voice carried the same measured tone, his posture as steady as ever. He asked Ryan about his classes, about the next football practice, about things that belonged in the safe rhythm of father and son. To Ethan, however, every glance felt heavy, every word a reminder of the night they had crossed a line. When Ryan left to fetch more firewood, the silence between Ethan and Mark returned, unspoken yet thick. Mark busied himself with the coffee pot, pouring dark liquid into 2 mugs. He slid one toward Ethan without a word. Their fingers did not touch this time, but the absence of contact made the memory of it sharper. Ethan stared into the swirling steam, forcing his voice steady. Do you regret it? Mark's hand stilled on the counter. He did not look up immediately. When he finally did, his eyes were cautious, weighed down by something Ethan couldn't read fully. "I don't regret feeling it," he said at last. "But I regret what it means." Ethan swallowed. The words cut more deeply than silence would have. "Because of Ryan." "Because of everything," Mark corrected, his jaw tightening. "This isn't a road either of us can walk without consequence." The conversation ended as Ryan returned, arms full of wood, breaking the fragile honesty. Ethan forced a smile, but his stomach coiled tight. He told himself he could bear it, that the memory of one night would fade with distance. Yet every shared glance across the room told him otherwise. The day unfolded in fragments. They hiked along the wet shoreline once the rain eased, Ryan bounding ahead with the energy of someone oblivious to shadows. Mark trailed behind, steady and quiet, and Ethan found himself caught in the middle, torn between loyalty and longing. At one point, Ryan climbed a fallen log, balancing precariously as he shouted some challenge back to Ethan. Ethan laughed, but his eyes shifted instinctively toward Mark, who watched his son with a fondness softened by fatigue. Their gazes met for only a second before Mark looked away, but in that instant Ethan felt the gravity of what they shared, something unspeakable, something that would not vanish. That night, the cabin was quieter. Ryan stayed up late on his phone, stretched out on his bed upstairs. Ethan sat alone in the living room, staring at the dim firelight, waiting without admitting to himself what he was waiting for. Mark appeared at the doorway, his presence filling the room even before he spoke. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You should try to sleep," Mark said. "I can't," Ethan admitted. For a long moment, neither moved. The unspoken promise of the previous night hung between them, dangerous and magnetic. Mark finally stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This can't become a habit. You know that." Ethan nodded, though the ache in his chest deepened. "But you still came." Mark's silence was answer enough. He sat across from Ethan, the distance deliberate this time. His eyes lingered, but his hands stayed firmly in his lap. "I need you to understand," he said, his voice carrying both sternness and softness. "What happened, it can't define you. Or me." It was a moment, not a path. Ethan nodded again, though the words only tangled further in his mind. He wanted to believe him, yet every glance, every pause, every heartbeat told him the storm wasn't over, it had only changed form. When Ryan's footsteps creaked above, both men fell silent. The moment dissolved into stillness, leaving only the fire to fill the space. Mark rose first, retreating toward the hall without another word. Ethan sat alone, the embers glowing faintly, his thoughts louder than the crackle of wood. He knew the weekend would end, the cabin would empty, and life would resume. But something had been carved into him, into them both, and though he didn't know where it would lead, he knew this wasn't an ending. It was only the beginning of a silence they would carry, one secret, two hearts, and a storm that refused to pass.